There's a moment in every person's life when they realize the truth. No one wants to tell you being nice doesn't make you powerful. Being safe doesn't make you respected. Being agreeable doesn't make you indispensable. It makes you invisible. And invisible people, they're the first to be forgotten, the first to be replaced, the first to be discarded when convenience demands it. You've been lied to your entire life about how power works. They told you to be kind, to be understanding, to win people over with warmth and generosity. They told you that love conquers all, that being the good person always pays off in the end. But look around you. Look at who actually gets promoted. Look at who gets their calls returned. Look at who never gets their time wasted or their boundaries crossed. It's not the people who smile the brightest. It's the people others are afraid to disappoint. Fear isn't the enemy of respect. It's the foundation. When someone fears the consequences of disrespecting you, they respect you. When they don't fear those consequences, they walk all over you with a smile, knowing you'll forgive them because you're such a good person. Today, you discover why the most powerful people in history understood one simple truth. It's better to be feared than loved. Not because fear is evil, but because fear is honest. Fear acknowledges power, and power is the only thing that guarantees your voice gets heard in a world that profits from your silence. The cost of playing safe isn't just missed opportunities. It's a life where others decide your worth, your schedule, your boundaries, and your future. Are you ready to pay that price forever? Remember the last time someone cancelled on you last minute. You probably said, "No problem," and moved on. Remember the last time someone interrupted you mid-sentence at a meeting. You probably just waited your turn and pretended it didn't sting. Remember the last time someone took credit for your idea. You probably told yourself it wasn't worth the confrontation. These aren't random moments of bad luck. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. People don't fear disappointing you. When there are no consequences for disrespect, disrespect becomes the default. Watch how people treat the boss who's understanding versus the boss who's demanding. The understanding boss gets walked on, gets excuses, gets half-effort disguised as trying. The demanding boss gets results, gets punctuality, gets people's best work because they know mediocrity has consequences. Notice how friends treat the person who always says yes versus the person who sometimes says no. The yes person gets invited as an afterthought, gets asked for favors constantly, gets treated like emotional furniture. The selective person gets courted, gets prioritized, gets treated like their time actually matters. See how family treats the relative who never stands up for themselves versus the one who draws hard lines. The pushover gets their holidays hijacked, their advice ignored, their feelings trampled. The boundary setter gets respect, gets consultation, gets treated like an adult whose opinions carry weight. This isn't because people are inherently cruel. It's because humans are efficiency machines. We invest energy where we have to and coast where we can. If disrespecting you costs nothing, disrespect becomes cost-effective. If disappointing you has no consequences, disappointment becomes convenient. You've been teaching people that you're safe to dismiss, safe to deprioritize, safe to take for granted, and they've been excellent students. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is much safer to be feared than loved. This wasn't the opinion of a tyrant. It was the observation of a political scientist who studied power for decades. He understood that love is conditional, temporary, and selfish. People love you when it benefits them and abandon you when it doesn't. But fear is consistent, fear is reliable, fear creates lasting behavioral change. Sun Tzu taught that supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. The enemy here isn't other people. It's the assumption that you can be safely ignored. When people believe that crossing you comes with consequences, they rarely test that belief. The fear of retaliation prevents the need for actual retaliation. Modern psychology confirms what these strategists knew intuitively. People modify their behavior based on perceived consequences, not moral appeals. You can ask someone nicely to respect your time 100 times, and they'll nod and keep showing up late. But create one real consequence for their lateness, and suddenly they discover punctuality. This isn't manipulation, it's understanding human nature. People don't respect boundaries because boundaries are reasonable. They respect boundaries because crossing them costs something they're not willing to pay. When you remove the cost, you remove the boundary. Authority doesn't come from being right. It comes from being consequential. When your approval or disapproval changes people's outcomes, they pay attention to your approval or disapproval. When it doesn't, they don't. You've been trying to earn respect through goodness, but respect isn't earned through goodness, it's commanded through power. And power isn't about being cruel, it's about being consequential. There are two versions of you. The first version is the one you've been living as: careful, accommodating, eager to please. This version apologizes for taking up space, accepts scraps of attention gratefully, and counts any acknowledgement as a victory. This version has good intentions, kind words, and zero real influence over their own life. The second version is the one you're about to become: strategic, selective, and impossible to dismiss. This version doesn't ask for respect. They create conditions where disrespect becomes too expensive to afford. They don't plead for consideration. They make their absence felt more than their presence. They don't hope for better treatment. They ensure it through careful consequence management. The first version gets sympathy. The second version gets results. The first version is loved when convenient and forgotten when not. The second version is remembered, considered, and carefully handled because people know there's substance behind the surface. You've been the victim in your own life story, accepting whatever treatment others decided to give you. But victims don't get to set terms. Victims don't get to make demands. Victims get managed, not respected. Predators, on the other hand, get space. They get consideration. They get careful treatment because everyone knows they have options, standards, and the power to enforce both. The transformation isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming consequential. It's about shifting from hoping people will treat you well to ensuring they don't dare treat you poorly. Are you ready to stop being the person others manage and become the person others consider? Love is a beautiful emotion, but it's a terrible foundation for respect. Love is conditional, changeable, and ultimately selfish. People love you when you make them feel good, when you serve their needs, when you make their lives easier. But the moment you stop being useful, the moment you have needs of your own, that love evaporates like morning mist. Fear, however, is permanent. Fear creates neural pathways that don't fade with mood changes or shifting circumstances. When someone fears disappointing you, they think twice before acting. When someone fears the consequences of disrespecting you, they modify their behavior preemptively. Think about the people in your life who never get their time wasted. It's not because they're more lovable. It's because others have learned that wasting their time comes with costs. They've created an association. If I'm casual with this person's schedule, there will be consequences I don't want to face. This doesn't mean being harsh or cruel. It means being consistent with consequences. When someone shows up late to your meeting, the meeting doesn't happen. When someone cancels last minute, they don't get rescheduled immediately. When someone interrupts you, you stop talking and make the silence uncomfortable until they realize their mistake. Love says, I hope you'll treat me well because I'm treating you well. Fear says, you will treat me well because not treating me well is expensive. One is a request. The other is a reality. The people who command respect aren't necessarily the people others enjoy being around. But they're the people others think carefully about before acting. And that careful consideration is the beginning of respect. When people fear disappointing you more than they fear inconveniencing you, you've shifted the power dynamic permanently. Predictable people are manageable people. When others can anticipate your reactions, plan around your responses, and count on your patterns, they can manipulate your behavior to serve their needs. Predictability is the enemy of power because it removes mystery, and mystery is what keeps people cautious. The most powerful people you know aren't the ones who explode at everything. They're the ones whose reactions you can't predict. You treat them carefully because you don't know which action will trigger consequences and which won't. This uncertainty creates a buffer of respect around them. When you're predictably nice, people know they can push boundaries without real consequences. When you're predictably angry, people know exactly how much they can get away with before you blow up. But when you're unpredictably selective about what you tolerate, people tread carefully because they can't game the system. This doesn't mean being erratic or unstable. It means being strategic about when you show your power and when you don't. Sometimes you let small things slide completely. Sometimes you respond to minor infractions with disproportionate seriousness. The key is that others can't predict which response they'll get. A person who smiles and accepts disrespect 90% of the time but responds with cold, serious consequences the other 10% is more feared than someone who complains constantly. Because the complainer is predictable, their bark has no bite. But the selective enforcer, they're dangerous because you never know when you'll cross the line. Unpredictability creates the space between you and others that prevents casual disrespect. When people can't predict your reactions, they err on the side of caution. And caution directed toward you is another word for respect. Words can be argued with, negotiated around, and forgotten. But silence. Silence forces people to fill the void with their own imagination. And imagination always conjures worse consequences than reality. When someone disrespects you and you respond with a lecture, you've given them something to push back against. You've opened a negotiation about whether their behavior was actually wrong. But when you respond with calculated silence, you've created a psychological vacuum that they have to fill with their own guilt and worry. Silence after someone cancels on you last minute is more powerful than explaining why that hurt your feelings. Silence after someone interrupts you is more intimidating than asking them to let you finish. Silence after someone takes credit for your work is more memorable than defending your contribution. Because silence says, I'm not going to dignify this with a response, but I'm also not going to forget it. It creates uncertainty about what comes next, and uncertainty breeds fear. The most powerful people in any room are often the quietest. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that words dilute power while silence concentrates it. When you speak constantly, your words lose value. When you speak selectively, people listen. Strategic silence after disrespect creates a psychological debt in the other person's mind. They know they've crossed a line, but they don't know what the consequences will be or when they'll come. This uncertainty is more effective than any verbal retaliation because it lives in their imagination, growing stronger over time. Master the art of meaningful silence, and you'll never need to raise your voice again. Anger that comes from being out of control is weakness. But anger that comes from choice, displayed strategically and rarely, is one of the most powerful tools for reshaping how others treat you. Most people either never show anger or show it constantly. The never angry person gets walked on because there seem to be no consequences for poor treatment. The always angry person gets ignored because their anger has no special meaning. It's just background noise. But the person who is calm 99% of the time and shows controlled, cold anger 1% of the time. That anger carries weight. It signals that something significant has happened, that a line has been crossed that shouldn't have been crossed. Controlled aggression isn't about losing your temper. It's about choosing your moments. When someone repeatedly shows up late despite your polite requests, and you finally say, "This is the last time we'll have this conversation. If you're late again, don't bother coming at all," delivered with cold seriousness, it lands with impact because it's rare. The key is that your anger must feel controlled, not emotional. Emotional anger can be dismissed as you having a bad day. Controlled anger suggests you've made a calculated decision, that this behavior is unacceptable and consequences will follow. One moment of controlled aggression can prevent months of boundary violations. People remember the moment you showed them that your patience has limits, and they modify their behavior to avoid triggering those limits again. When you show anger strategically and rarely, it becomes a powerful reset button for relationships that have drifted into disrespect. When you correct someone privately, you give them the opportunity to save face and potentially dismiss your concerns as a personal quirk. When you correct someone publicly, you create a story that spreads beyond the immediate situation, establishing your reputation as someone who enforces standards. This doesn't mean humiliating people or being cruel in front of others. It means being willing to address disrespect when it happens, regardless of who's watching. When someone interrupts you in a meeting, you don't wait for a private conversation later. You address it in the moment. "I wasn't finished speaking," delivered calmly but firmly in front of others, does more to prevent future interruptions than any private conversation could. Public consequences create public lessons. When others see that disrespecting you has immediate, visible results, they learn without having to test the boundaries themselves. You're not just correcting one person's behavior, you're educating everyone who witnesses the interaction. But rewards, kindness, and appreciation work better in private. When you praise someone publicly, they may discount it as performance for others. When you praise them privately, it feels genuine and personal. Private rewards create loyalty, public consequences create respect. The person who is publicly firm about their standards, but privately warm with those who meet them, becomes someone others want to please, rather than someone they fear will embarrass them. Balance is crucial: public enough to set the standard, private enough to maintain relationships with those who deserve them. Availability destroys value. When you're always accessible, always free, always willing to accommodate, your time becomes worthless in others' minds. But when your presence feels limited, rare, and valuable, people treat access to you as a privilege worth protecting. This isn't about being difficult or playing games. It's about recognizing that abundance breeds carelessness, while scarcity breeds careful handling. When people know they can reach you anytime, they'll interrupt you for trivial matters. When they know your availability is limited, they'll save the important things and be prepared when they do get your time. The busiest people you know aren't necessarily the most important, but they're often treated with more respect because their scarcity is visible. When someone has to wait for your response, schedule around your availability, or compete for your attention, they value that access more. Create strategic scarcity around your time, attention, and energy. Don't respond to messages immediately just because you can. Don't say yes to every invitation just because you're free. Don't make yourself endlessly available just because it seems nice. When people have to earn your time rather than expect it, they treat it with respect. When they have to wait for your attention rather than demand it, they prepare better questions. When they have to consider whether their request is worth your energy, they stop bothering you with trivial matters. Scarcity isn't about being mean, it's about being selective, and selectivity signals value. Your reputation is your advance guard, doing the work of establishing respect before you even enter a room. When people have heard that you're someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect, they're less likely to test that reputation when they meet you. This doesn't mean cultivating a reputation for being difficult or unreasonable. It means building a consistent track record of having standards and enforcing them. When word spreads that you're someone who follows through on consequences, who doesn't accept poor treatment, and who has options when disrespected, people approach you differently. Reputation works through stories. When someone experiences or witnesses you enforcing a boundary, they tell others. Don't show up late to meetings with them. They'll end the meeting. Don't interrupt them. They'll make you wait while they finish their point. Don't take credit for their work. They have documentation and will call you out. These stories become your reputation, and your reputation becomes your protection. People modify their behavior based on what they've heard about you, before they've even tested you personally. Build your reputation through consistent actions, not words. Don't tell people you have standards, show them. Don't threaten consequences, implement them. Don't demand respect. Create conditions where disrespect becomes too costly to consider. A strong reputation means you rarely have to enforce boundaries because people have learned not to cross them. Your reputation does the heavy lifting of maintaining respect. Detachment is the ultimate power move because it signals that you don't need others' approval, validation, or acceptance to maintain your sense of self. When people realize they can't manipulate you through emotional leverage, they're forced to deal with you as an equal rather than someone they can manage. Most people are desperate for approval, acceptance, and inclusion. This desperation makes them predictable and manageable. They'll accept poor treatment rather than risk rejection. They'll compromise their standards rather than face disapproval. They'll tolerate disrespect rather than be seen as difficult. But detachment changes the equation. When you're genuinely okay with walking away, saying no, or being disliked for having standards, you become unmanageable. People can't use your need for their approval against you because you don't have that need. This doesn't mean being cold or uncaring. It means being secure enough in your own worth that others' opinions of you don't determine your actions. When someone tries to guilt you into accepting poor treatment, detachment allows you to say, "I understand you're disappointed, but this is my standard." Detachment gives you the power to mean what you say because you're willing to accept the consequences of standing by your words. When people realize you'll actually follow through on boundaries because you don't need their approval more than you need your self-respect, they stop testing those boundaries. The person who needs nothing from you has all the power in the relationship. But here's the crucial distinction that separates powerful people from bullies. The purpose of inspiring fear isn't to harm others. It's to protect yourself. You're not learning these principles to destroy people or make them miserable. You're learning them to ensure you're treated with the respect every human being deserves. Use fear to create boundaries, not to tear others down. Use it to protect your time, energy, and dignity, not to feed your ego or satisfy petty revenge. The goal is to stop being taken advantage of, not to become someone who takes advantage of others. When someone consistently shows up late to your meetings, creating consequences isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting your time. When someone repeatedly interrupts you, addressing it firmly isn't about dominating the conversation. It's about ensuring your voice gets heard. The people who respect you because they fear disappointing you often become the people who genuinely care about your well-being. Respect built on clear boundaries and consistent consequences creates healthier relationships than approval seeking ever could. Remember, you're not becoming cruel, you're becoming consequential. There's a profound difference between inspiring fear through harm and inspiring respect through strength. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, practice one of these principles each day. Day 1, choose unpredictability. Vary your responses to see how people adjust. Day 2, practice strategic silence instead of immediate verbal responses. Day 3, create scarcity around your availability. Continue through each principle, observing how differently people treat you. Document the changes. Notice who starts being more punctual, more considerate, more careful with your time. Watch how conversations shift when you're no longer desperately seeking approval. Observe how your own confidence grows when you realize you have power over how others treat you. This isn't a game or manipulation. It's field research into your own potential. You're discovering what happens when you stop accepting whatever treatment others decide to give you and start creating conditions for the treatment you deserve. Most people will never do this exercise because they're too attached to being seen as nice. But nice people finish last, not because the world is unfair, but because they've trained everyone around them that their needs come last. The 7-day challenge will show you that respect isn't something you earn through goodness. It's something you command through strength. Are you ready to discover what respect feels like? Imagine walking into any room knowing that people will think twice before disrespecting you. Imagine having your time treated as valuable because you've made it clear that wasting it has consequences. Imagine never again having to wonder if someone will show up on time, follow through on commitments, or treat your opinions with consideration. This isn't fantasy. It's the inevitable result of consistently applying these principles. When you stop being the person others can safely ignore and become the person they must thoughtfully consider, everything changes. Your schedule becomes your own because people respect your time. Your opinions carry weight because you've shown there are consequences for dismissing them. Your boundaries hold firm because crossing them is no longer cost-free. You'll find yourself in different types of conversations, invited to different types of opportunities, and treated with a different type of consideration. Not because you've become mean or difficult, but because you've become significant. The relationships that survive this transformation will be stronger, healthier, and more genuine. The relationships that don't survive were built on your willingness to accept poor treatment. And those relationships weren't serving you anyway. Your future self will thank you for making the decision to stop being safely dismissible and start being carefully respected. Today marks the death of the version of you that accepted whatever treatment others decided to give. That person served their purpose. They were kind, understanding, and accommodating. They also got walked on, taken for granted, and treated as optional. The person you're becoming doesn't ask for respect. They create conditions where disrespect becomes too expensive to afford. They don't hope for better treatment. They ensure it through strategic consequence management. They don't plead for consideration. They make their absence felt more powerfully than their presence. This transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you were meant to be before the world convinced you that your needs didn't matter. You were born with value, dignity, and the right to respectful treatment. Somewhere along the way, you learned to trade those things for approval. But approval from people who don't respect you is worthless. And you can't be truly kind to others if you're not powerful enough to protect yourself. Kindness without strength is just weakness wearing a pretty mask. The old you hoped people would treat you well. The new you ensures they don't dare treat you poorly. The old you was loved when convenient and forgotten when not. The new you is remembered, considered, and carefully handled. You're not becoming a villain in anyone else's story. You're finally becoming the hero in your own. This isn't just another video to watch and forget. This is your invitation to join a different type of community. One where people choose respect over approval, strength over popularity, and personal power over people-pleasing. Subscribe not because you want more content, but because you're ready to become someone who doesn't need to consume content about being powerful because they're too busy being powerful. Hit that notification bell not to be entertained, but to be reminded that you made a commitment to transform how the world treats you. The comment section isn't for casual viewers. It's for people who are actually implementing these principles and sharing their results. Right? Respect over approval. If you're ready to stop being the person others manage and start being the person others consider. But remember, knowledge without action is just entertainment. You can watch 1,000 videos about power and still get treated like a doormat if you never actually implement what you learn. The principles only work if you work the principles. The choice is yours: remain safely invisible and comfortably dismissible, or become someone others think twice about before disrespecting. One path leads to more of the same treatment you've always received. The other leads to the respect you've always deserved. Which version of yourself will you choose to become?